So Sophie has actually, in a way, Sophie has given you a really great overview of where we are with EdTech. In a sense, I don't have to repeat I'll have some additional things to say about EdTech, but what I think is most valuable here is if I give you the big picture on what is happening to the transformation of human consciousness, ability, reasoning. It is so far beyond what I said in the book. Raise your hand if you've read The Anxious Generation. Okay, so I painted a pretty dark picture of what's happening. Since the book came out, I've realized it's just the tip of the iceberg. It is so much worse than I said because I didn't fully understand the damage to reasoning, thinking, focus, attention, decision-making, learning. So that's what I'll be focusing on today. But I think it really helps if you have a big picture, a way to think about this. And so the metaphor that I want to give you is think about tree roots growing. This is going to be a metaphor for the way that neurons develop in your child's brain. The brain comes out very unformed, vast numbers of neurons, almost full size by age 6. And from then on in, it's not growth. It's actually the death of a lot of neurons to make room for the connections of the ones that are going to work. And so this process, especially from age 6 or 7, sort of late childhood, or childhood through mid-puberty or late puberty really, is this incredibly sensitive period where, as you can see, I hope you can see in this image, here's a tree, it sent out its roots, and the way the roots grew was structured by the environment that it found. This tree was growing along some tiles, and so the roots grew in a square pattern because that's where they could go down and get water. Okay? So now imagine your child's brain, neurons growing, shaped by whatever the environment it finds. Here's another example of trees growing. This is a tree that grew up around a Civil War era tombstone. And I imagine over the course of a century, the tree scraped against the tombstone, and then the bark ended up kind of growing around the tombstone. So I think this is a very good metaphor for what happens. And so, in fact, here is an image. Let's see, where's the clicker? So now let's think about your child's body growing. 50% of our kids in both countries say that they're online almost constantly. The phone's almost always in their hand. They're always checking. So what would happen if your child always has a phone resting on their pinky as their bones are growing during puberty, during the growth spurt of puberty? And some people are finding that their left pinky is bent compared to the right pinky. If you're over 30, don't bother checking because you went through puberty before this. But if you're under 30, you might want to check. It's not just our pinkies, even those of us who are adults. Right now, I have a pinched nerve in my neck. It's been causing me pain for about a month. I'll never know if it's because I'm hunched over my computers, but these kinds of pains are increasing. And the clearest evidence we have that our bodies are growing around our phones is that eyeballs are lengthening, so that human eyeballs no longer focus on the retina. They focus a little bit in front of the retina on average. This could be cured if we simply sent the kids out for an hour or two a day, because its sunlight and long views allows the eye to grow properly. But when your child is growing up looking at close screens for hours and hours a day, the eyeball grows incorrectly. So there's so much more we could say. There's the immobility, which sedentariness related to obesity. Each additional hour on social media corresponds to a 62% higher risk of a binge eating disorder. So if it was just this physical health damage, that would be enough for us to say, what the hell are we doing? What are we doing to our kids? But this is just the beginning of the story. Let me see, where is it that I can get this? Okay, let's try that. All right. And then, of course, sleep. I won't even go into it. Obviously, if kids are missing an extra 30 to 45 minutes of sleep a night for their whole childhood, it's going to have compounding effects on all those systems. So this is a photo of an actual Gen Z brain. And you can see, okay, I made it with artificial intelligence, but essentially, this, I think, is what has happened to people born after 1995. It didn't happen to people born before 1995. And I think that our kids' brains are now growing around their phones, metaphorically, the way this tree grew around this tombstone. So in the rest of my talk, so let me I'll just summarize. For those who haven't read the book, I can summarize it in a single slide. It's a tragedy in 2 acts. In Act 1, we got rid of the play-based childhood. I thought it was just America that did that because we're so paranoid. We don't trust each other. We freaked out about kidnapping in the 1990s. Cable television freaked us out. But you did it too. And Canada did it. You guys didn't have the same crime as we had in America. But all the English-speaking countries except New Zealand stopped letting their kids out so much. We're overprotective. We're afraid that they'll be kidnapped or sexually molested. But as long as they're on their computer at home talking to strangers, they're safe. So Act 1, we lose the play-based childhood. Act 2, the phone-based childhood comes storming in faster than any technological change has ever happened. And the bottom line is that we have overprotected our children in the real world where they need to grow up and have millions of experiences, and we have underprotected them online. So here's the outline of the rest of my talk. I'll go through a couple of these major kinds of damage, and then I'll talk about what the solution is with a special focus on education and EdTech. So I've already covered the physical harms, but again, that's just the beginning. So let's briefly go through the mental illness harms. When I started writing the book, I thought I was going to write a book about social media and girls, because that's where the evidence was best. Girls who use social media heavily have higher rates of anxiety and depression. Now, is that just correlation or is it causation? I was going to show that it was causation. But what I discovered is that it's so much more than that, although that is one of the central acts. So what first got me interested in the whole thing was that I'm a college professor and at New York University, and we all saw at universities across the United States that these were the rates of various illnesses up through 2012 when everybody was a millennial. And then beginning 2013, Gen Z begins to arrive, and these rates go up. What's the yellow line? The yellow line is psychological disorders. I'll try standing over on this side. Psychological disorders. That's the big thing that differentiates Gen Z from the millennials. And in all the graphs I'll show you, they're all the same. Basically flat lines until 2010, no real change from the 90s through 2010. These are the reasons, the percentage of people coming into college mental health centers, the percentage presenting with different conditions, and as you can see, everything goes up, but it's especially anxiety and depression. That's what dominates. And so this is college student data, but we have it for the nationally representative data. And whenever this is all teenagers, and whenever we look at anxiety, depression, we always find that girls have higher rates than boys. And also, interestingly, in all the slides, there's a very sharp elbow for the girls around 2012, 2013. The boys are up a lot too, as a percentage. So the big increase number-wise is girls. But percentage-wise, boys are also up a lot, but interestingly, it's not as sharp. It's a more diffuse, and that's a clue to what happened. And you can see the COVID effect there. This was not caused by COVID. This was all baked in before COVID. Okay, so, and some people say, oh, isn't it just, they're more comfortable talking about it, it's being destigmatized, this isn't a real thing, the kids are okay. That one Who album, that's the main thing I get. The kid, every critical review of my book is, the kids are all right. But if that was the case, if it was just some artifact of reporting or measuring, then we wouldn't see the same change in behavior, but we do. This is an emergency room visits for self-harm by 10 to 14-year-old Americans. What we see is when we hit this period, the rate for girls pentuples. They didn't used to cut themselves, and now 10 to 14-year-old girls do cut themselves. Boys are up too, but beginning from a much lower floor. And we see the same thing in suicide. So here boys have higher rates because they make fewer attempts, but when boys make a suicide attempt, they tend to use a gun in the United States, a gun or a tall building, whereas girls use reversible means. So the net effect is that suicide is actually a much bigger taker of boys than girls, but both go way up. And again, we see this really weird, sudden increase around 2013. There's an elbow at 2012. Okay, and the moment when I changed my research and decided I had to stop writing a book on what social media is doing to democracy, and I had to write a book on teen mental health, was when I discovered that it's not just America. I already knew that was happening in the UK, but once I discovered it's Canada, it's Australia, it's Scandinavia, it's actually all of Europe, not so much Eastern Europe, but most of the developed world, the exact same thing is happening at the same time in the same way with bigger impacts on girls. So I began on my Substack after Babel. We began exploring the international data, and so I'll just show you a couple of slides for the UK. So this is research by an economist at Dartmouth, David Blanchflower. So what he plots here is a long-running survey in the UK, Scotland, the rest of the UK, and he uses a slightly different measure here in the US. It's despair, but the trend, as you'll see, is again, at least in the UK, not really anything happening before 2010. And then, oops, sorry, wait a sec, other way. And then this happens. So for some reason, young people around the English-speaking world suddenly became much more anxious, depressed, despairing, miserable, self-harming, suicidal. In this 5-year period, this window, 2010 to 2015, everything changed. And we have similar data for self-harm for the UK. This is absolutely stunning. This is the sharpest graph I've ever seen. Girls suddenly in the UK started cutting themselves and being hospitalized. The same pattern, it's not quite as sharp, but we see the same pattern. These are psychiatric emergency room visits in Australia, and we have data from Canada, New Zealand, Scandinavia. So that's all I'll say about the mental illness. It's huge. It's what got me into the book, but now I discover it's only a small part of what's going on. Let's talk about why. Why is this happening? And I've been putting this story out for several years now. I keep asking for alternate explanations. People provide alternate explanations for the US, like something about President Obama or a particular school shooting that we had in 2012, which was horrible, and we had lockdown drills after that. But why did that cause girls in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK to start cutting themselves? It doesn't make any sense. So no one has even come up with an alternate hypothesis to this one, the Great Rewiring story, that 2-act tragedy that I told you about. So I can demonstrate how each of the acts happened like this. I want you all to think about the age at which you got freedom, the age at which you could go outside, go over, play with your friends, get on your bicycle, no adult supervision. I think I've done this correctly. Is it true that at 6 years old, generally second years are 6 plus or minus? Is that accurate? Okay, so think about, when, was it second year, fourth year, when were you given freedom? Think about your number, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 7, not, whatever, pick a number. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna answer by generation, even though there's probably not a lot of Gen Z here, but we'll get around that. So first, raise your hand if you were born in 1981 or earlier. Raise your hand high. Okay, so you're all Gen X or baby boomers. So now just you, only the people who raised their hand, at what age were you let out? I'm going to point to your section of the room, and when I do, yell out your number. Ready? Go. Okay, that's what I find all over the Western world, or all over the English-speaking world, I should say. And so this is the pattern. This is what we find. For Gen X and baby boomers, and at least in the United States, we had a huge crime wave. I mean, there were crazy people chopping off other people's ears. We had psycho killers. We had all, there were drugs. There was, drunk driving, and some of the drunk drivers were us. But we all... we all played outside because we were kids, and kids play outside with each other. So that was the norm in our countries. Okay, now raise your hand if you're born after 1995. How many Gen Z do we have? Okay, we have a few. Let's start with you. Let's just hear what you say. So you all have your number, Gen Z? Okay, when I point to you, yell it out. 12. Yeah. Okay, 12 to 14. And what I sometimes do when there's not a lot of Gen Z is I ask the rest of you, at what age, raise your hand if you have Gen Z kids or kids born after 1995, at what age did you let them out, or were you going to let them out before you heard me talk? Okay? Everyone got your number? Seriously, parents, you got your number? Before you heard this talk, what was it going to be? Yell it out. Okay, still 12 is the norm. So 12 is the norm in the UK right now, and it used to be 7 or 8. So this is what I find all over. We've changed. And we changed as crime rates went down. I presume in the UK there's less crime now than there was in the 1980s. And that's probably to do with leaded gas, but I won't come back to that. That's just but there's data backing this up. This article in The Guardian a couple of years ago, a study found that children are not getting enough opportunities to develop their ability to assess and manage risk. Risk-taking is a feature of childhood. It's not something we should protect them against. Second, if children are getting less time to play outdoors, this may have an impact on their mental health and overall well-being. It sure does. So this story is not, I don't want you to come away from here thinking you heard a story about social media or even about screens. This is a story about childhood. Keep that in mind. We have to give our kids back an excellent, fun, healthy, thrilling, risky, exciting, educational childhood, and they don't have one now. Okay, let's see. So that's the first act of the tragedy. We got rid of the play-based childhood needlessly. We don't let our kids out till they're around 12. But here's the second wave, the second act of the tragedy. So it began magnificently, and that's why we were tricked, because the internet came in two totally separate technological waves. And most of the people here are old enough to remember when you first saw a web browser. To me, it was like God came down to earth and said, do you want to know everything instantly? Just ask. Like, this is the stuff of mythology. But there it was, web browsers where you could get instant information. And so we were all amazed. It was incredible. And children back then, the millennials, grew up on this stuff. And they're fine. And they travel around the world, and they have adventures, and they start companies. And they're the last normal, healthy human generation. Something changed, and that something, I believe, is the second wave of the internet, which is the arrival of social media beginning 2003. Is when we get Friendster, Facebook, MySpace. And then we get the smartphone, and it's in this second wave that the phone-based childhood begins and teen mental health plummets. But we didn't realize it was happening because we were all such techno-optimists. We thought this is the way of the future. It's good for our kids to be spending time with these magical devices. Maybe they'll learn to program. Maybe they'll be the next Steve Jobs. To just walk you through exactly how it changed, because some of you, the younger people here, lived through it. So suppose you were born in 1995, which is the last year of the millennial generation. That means that you turned 15 in 2010. In 2010, very few teenagers had a smartphone. The iPhone came out in 2007, but it's only really 2011, 2012 that it becomes the transformation. So you went through puberty with anyone recognize the model of that phone? Did you have that over here? The Razor is what we called it in America. So it's this beloved phone of the millennials. So you went through puberty on a Razor. There was no front-facing camera, no internet, no Instagram, no attention economy. You used it to call your friends and to text your friends and family. That's what you used it for. And there was a game called Snake, I think, I'm told that. But that was it. But suppose you were born just 5 years later. Suppose you're a girl born in the year 2000. So you turned 15 in 2015. And what happens? In 2010, the front-facing camera comes out and Instagram comes out. In 2012, Facebook buys Instagram. They don't change it, but that's the year that all the girls rush onto it. 2012 is the year that the girls' social life moves on to Instagram. And I believe that's why 2013 is the year that the mental health epidemic, the mental illness epidemic begins. So you have unlimited interruptions. You are the product of the attention economy. There was always an attention economy, even back to the days of radio, but very weak, very mild. It gets multiplied tenfold when kids have a smartphone. And so this is what I've called the great rewiring of childhood. And childhood used to have adventure and risk. I mean, they'd never allow this on a playground today. And this, do you remember when, if you found an extraterrestrial, you could just, put it in your basket and ride around and have adventures? Kids had that much autonomy. But today, if you are a boy, you can't go over to your friend's house. If you do, you can't play with them. You have to go to your house, and that way you have your headset, your avatar, and then you can play with your friends. So childhood has become so solitary and motionless and riskless. We can see that with data from the US here. This is the number of hours that people of different ages spend with friends outside of work and school. And what we see is that for 15 to 24-year-olds, the drop, they used to spend 2 or 3 hours a day with friends. Older people spent half an hour. We're married, we've got jobs, we're not hanging out with our friends like the TV show Friends. But young people are, until they get smartphones. Once they get smartphones, it plunges, and I want to show you some interesting things about this graph. So we get a much bigger drop for the youngest generation than for older people. The decline begins way before COVID, and amazingly, if you look at the 2019 data point, May 2019, and then you look at May 2020, the height of COVID lockdowns, you don't see a COVID effect. Here you can see that all the other groups are now spending less time with their friends. You see a bend for the older generations. There's no bend for the younger generations because they began social distancing as soon as they got their phones. And by 2019, they were almost done. And then 2020 just finished the job. And even this overstates the amount of time that they're spending with their friends, because most of the time with friends is this. It's just, are you looking at your phone, which is kind of antisocial, or are you all looking at the same person's phone, which is more social? There's very little face-to-face contact, very little shared laughter. And here's data from the UK. Both of our countries are in the same boat. This is Ofcom data, the percentage of 4, 6, 8-year-olds that have their own smartphone, so it's remarkable that 25%, 20% of your 4 and 6-year-olds have their own smartphone. In the U.S., actually, we got the number even worse. 40% of our 2-year-olds have their own iPad. 40% of 2-year-olds, because we've all discovered, just give the kid a touchscreen device and they're quiet, and you can do what you need to do. And all over the English-speaking world and all over the world, we're giving these things as pacifiers, and it's as effective as giving them opium. Opium works, but you don't want to raise your kid on opium. So my point is that in the UK as in the US, but even more in the UK, pretty much every person in the UK goes through puberty on a smartphone. Nobody's waiting beyond even to mid-puberty practically. So that's why I think it's happening now. Now let me share with you the thing that is completely freaking me out, the thing that is making me realize the mental health was not the biggest cost. It's the attention fragmentation. So you all know what fracking is, how there's all kinds of oil in the rocks below, way down, especially in the US and Canada. And it was discovered over several decades in the US that if you can crack up the rock and then pump water through it, you can actually extract every little bit of oil, okay? And so someone made up this term, attention fracking, because that's what a smartphone is able to do. Once kids have smartphones with push notifications and they're on apps with addictive algorithms, now for the first time in history, it's possible for a company to suck out every bit of attention of a child. My students at NYU, and these are the successful ones, there's a huge class issue here where the successful ones are not on 16 hours a day, and those who are on 14, 16 are not going to college. But even my NYU students, what's the first thing they do when they open their eyes? I go through this with them, their morning routine, their evening routine. Do you go to the bathroom? Do you drink water? No, the first thing they do is check their notifications and their messages. And then what's the last thing they do before they close their eyes? Same thing. And what do they do in between? Largely the same thing. And that's their day. So it's possible to grab every bit. You're waiting for an elevator, pull out the phone. You're sitting on the toilet, pull out the phone. There's a lull in the conversation, pull out the phone. And we do it too. We've all seen it. This is the transformation of life. Life was not like this in 2010, but it was by 2015. And so pushing further, the number of notifications that young people get, this one particular study found 237 notifications a day, but some of the kids were getting several thousand. They're on a lot of group chats. If you're on group chats, that can be thousands in a day. And then that's not even counting social media. That's just texting or so once you understand the deluge of interruptions, once you understand that many young people never are able to focus ever. My group at Anxious Generation and After Babel, we've created these long documents using quotes from TikTok and Snap, and we're going to do one on Meta. In their own words, they know exactly what they're doing. So this was, I think all 50 states in the US, the attorneys general are suing these companies for the damage they've done to kids. And so we have all these documents and internal reports. Here's one from TikTok. So this is written by TikTok employees. Compulsive usage correlates with a slew of negative mental health effects like loss of analytical skills, memory formation, contextual thinking, conversational depth, empathy, increased anxiety, in addition to interfering with essential personal responsibilities like sufficient sleep, work, school responsibilities, and connecting with loved ones. They know what they're doing, and they keep doing it. They will not change. So this is what's been happening to people born after 1995. And especially, I'd say, born after 2000, because the older members of Gen Z were affected by Instagram, not TikTok. But once you're at birth year 2000 or so, now it's really TikTok is the thing that has dominated your consciousness, and this is terrifying. So Derek Thompson wrote an article in The Atlantic. It sure looks like phones are making students dumber, because we have this really good test that we've given since the 1970s in the US. We can test students' academic ability in math and reading, and we had this amazing success story that even though there were demographic headwinds and breaking up of families and all kinds of problems, our educational system actually made progress in raising performance, actual performance, from 1971 through 2012. And then this happens. Now in 2023, people freak out, they see these numbers, and they say, my God, look what COVID did, look what COVID did. Now of course COVID didn't do this, but COVID restrictions did. But what they didn't seem to notice is that the drop started in 2012, not 2020. But okay, clearly COVID had something to do with it, and so people were expecting that there would be a rebound. Okay, as COVID recedes, the kids should come back, right? No, that's not what's happening, although actually it's interesting what is. So just a month or two ago, we got the 2024 data, and when you break it up by decile, when you take the top 10% of scores, which tend to be the kids who are from more educated, wealthy families. When you look at the top scorers, we made progress. This graph runs from 2000. So you can see we made progress, and there's a drop with COVID, and there is a little bit of a rebound there, same for them. But look what happens for everyone else. For the bottom 50%, the high watermark was 2012. And they've been dropping ever since, including 2023 to 2024. So whatever it is we're doing, and now we're moving beyond smartphones, and we'll talk about educational technology. Whatever it is that we've been doing to kids in school and out of school, it is devastating the bottom half. Whereas the children of people like you, you see problems, but their educational performance on average is not really dropping. It's not rising. But this is really expanding the equity problems, the inequality problems in the US and the UK. Oh, same thing here for reading scores, once again. Here, for some reason, it's 2 or 3 years later, and that might be a TikTok effect. Once kids go on TikTok, it's unlikely that they're going to read books again. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but they're going to read many fewer books once they start TikTok. And it's not just the US. Here's the PISA data set, from which takes 37 OECD countries and a few it's like 35 or 37 OECD countries. No trend before 2010, and then scores drop. So something is happening to humanity. Our children are learning less, they know less, they're performing worse. And this is when I really began to freak out, was when I talked with last fall, I talked to my students a lot about this. There was an Atlantic article about how even at the top schools in the United States, a lot of students can't read books. They're too long, it's just, they can't make it through. And so I was talking with my students about it, and I learned some of them can't watch a movie. Young people can't watch a movie anymore, it's too long. Now they can if they're multitasking. As long as they're doing multiple screens, they can sit through a movie. But just to go to a theater and sit and watch a movie, that's too long, they can't do that. And this suggests a shattering of human attention and attention spans, an ability to focus, an ability to do anything. So in talking with my students about this phenomenon, one of my students said, yeah, I open a book, I read a sentence, I get bored, I go to TikTok. TikTok is always there. It's always 2 seconds away. And we all know, sometimes, you're working, you're writing, like when I'm writing, and it's hard, I suddenly want to check my Amazon ranking, or I want to see what the weather, like we want escape from hard work, but when escape is always there, you escape from hard work. And when our kids never do hard work, they don't get educated. So my students told me about a program called PDF to Brain Rot. Here's how it works. Here's an article that I wrote with Jean Twenge. Suppose I were to assign this article to my students. Now, this would be very difficult for them because they'd have to read a long academic article. No problem, my students said. Just go to pdftobrainrot.com, I think it is. And what you do is you just drag the PDF into that box, and then you select what video game do you want to play in the background. And what it does is it uses AI. Here, I'll show. I don't know if the sound will play on this. Let's see. Let's find out if there's sound. Okay, global trends in adolescent loneliness. Skibbity boom. So it speaks it out to you, and it's sort of summarized. It's actually kind of like the first few sentences are accurate as summaries, but then it kind of goes off the deep end, and it's not really even related to what I wrote. But the point is that TikTok teaches you to have so much stimulation that you can be okay. This is the scary thing. Young people need so much stimulation. My students say they can't go to bed without taking something in, because they can't be alone with their thoughts. They don't have that skill. So PDF to Brain Rot. This is when I really began to freak out. This was. Do you ever see the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers? Or there's a moment in science fiction films where you realize you're all aliens. You know, everyone has been taken over. And so this was this moment in my class last November. In talking with them, I had this sudden feeling like, wait, maybe you're all like a different life form. What it's like to be you is radically different from what it is to be me, almost like a different species. I can't imagine not being able to read a book or watch a movie. So, and this is my NYU students who are not, they're doing pretty well. It's the bottom half that's not going to college, that all they do is video games and porn. It's them especially that are lost to humanity. So my freak out began in November, and then it really accelerated when I read this a few weeks ago, this article in the FT. Some of you may have seen it. A journalist for the FT brought together some surveys of kids and adults. So this is self-report data. How often do you have difficulty thinking or concentrating? And you see for US 18-year-old, there's a slight upward trend from 1990 to 2010. And how often do you have trouble learning new things? How often have you had in the last 30 days? And there's no trend here. So that's what happens until 2010. What do you think happens after 2010? The same thing that I've been showing you all along, which is this. So young people suddenly, after 2012, 2014 is when it really begins to rise, suddenly their cognition is messed with. They can't cogitate. It's much harder to think, much harder to read. And then check this out. I've never seen this before until this article. In the OECD, there's some test given to adults of like basic, read these 3 pages and answer some basic questions about what happened. And so I'll focus on the literacy. Numeracy is getting worse too. This is the percentage who have trouble, the percentage who don't have basic numeracy or literacy. And what you see, especially on literacy, is no real trend before 2010, and then this happens. So I don't know. The Netherlands is lucky; they are getting stupider, but at a much slower rate than the rest of us. In the U.S., we're getting stupid very, very fast since 2010. So this is when I really began to freak out. Like, this isn't just about depression, anxiety, self-harm, and suicide. This is about the loss of the human ability to think and learn and pass on knowledge at the very moment when AI is about to eclipse us and dominate us, perhaps. So Team Humanity, we're on the ropes here. We've got to get our next generation stronger. And check out this sentence. We appear to be looking less at the decline of reading per se. It's not just that people are reading fewer books, but we're seeing a broader erosion in the human capacity for mental focus and application. And this is what has really freaked me out and made me realize I totally underestimated the size of the problem when I wrote The Anxious Generation. Okay, and there's one other section of darkness, and then we'll turn to light. So just very, very briefly about girls versus boys. I have took a whole chapter to lay out all the reasons why girls are more harmed when their social life moves away from a small group of friends talking, or even talking on the phone is fine, to posting and commenting on each other's posts and liking each other's videos and posing and trying to get it all perfect. So for many reasons, girls are more harmed than boys. But what I want to show you now is actually the boys' story is not as obvious, but I'm coming to see it's actually possibly more serious. If you check in on girls and boys at age 14, the girls are doing worse. They have higher levels of anxiety and depression. And the boys are enjoying the video games and they're enjoying the porn. So it seems as though the girls are doing worse. But imagine spending your entire childhood on video games and porn. At the end of it, what do you have? Nothing. No college degree, no job. You're still living at home with your parents. Whereas the girls are much more likely to have finished university and gone out and gotten a job. So Richard Reeves, a wonderful British scholar who converted to Americanism, maybe at the wrong time, but he wrote this great book of Boys and Men, and we drew on his book to lay out the boys' story. The boys' story is a retreat from the real world. They're not making efforts in the real world because they're not rewarded for it. The real world is boring. The girls are much smarter, better self-control, get higher grades. So boys really feel just sort of ignored in the real world, but the virtual world gets better all the time. The video games, the porn, the high-speed data allows everything to be much more incredible. So boys aren't doing much other than video games and porn. And the way that I now think about it is we have this gigantic attention economy where trillions of dollars worth of value is created by sucking out, not just sucking out their attention, but addicting them. It's all about giving boys quick dopamine hits to keep them from going on someone else's platform of quick dopamine hits. And it begins with the video games. I can't say that video games are bad for everyone or even for a majority, but about 7 to 10% become habitual users, compulsive users, basically addicted. That's 10% of the boys are basically taken out. That's all they're going to do is video games. They get very angry when you take them off video games. But it moves on. It's not just the video games. Then it's porn. Then it's the vaping. It's the marijuana pens. There's so much addictive stuff being thrust at boys. And I just heard on some TV program here in the UK, children can buy pouches of nicotine and stuff it under their gum because it doesn't contain tobacco. So it's not legal. It's not illegal. Kids can buy it. And some of these packs have as much as a pack of cigarettes. I mean, it's insane what we are doing, and this is especially for boys. And then when they get a little bit older, they find ways to gamble before they're 18, and investing and crypto, everything is gamified for them. And that means they're going to go bankrupt, because the more you play, the closer you come to going deeply into debt, and then what prospect do you have for being self-supporting or for becoming a provider or a father or a husband? And I didn't even think of this one. I just saw this in the Times the other day. There'll be a report coming out in the next few days they looked at the criminal justice system, and over again, what they say is what they were surprised by is the degree to which at every turn people talked about social media contributing. Crime in the UK, when you have crime among children, social media is very, very often involved. And I think this comes at an especially poignant time. The report was commissioned way before the movie the series Adolescence, but we're all thinking about this now. So I didn't even talk much about radicalization of boys. So what's happening to boys in the long run, I actually think is more serious than what's happening to girls, and that's saying a lot. So the boys and the girls take a different route to losing their attention, losing their ability to think. But they end up in the same place. This is the saddest graph in the whole book. This is, do you agree with this statement? I feel that my life is not very useful. And until 2010, it was about 9% of boys and girls said that. From 1979 all the way through 2010, no change. And then, as you've already imagined, this happens. It's all happening at the same time. Our kids feel useless, which is one of the reasons they kill themselves so much. And guess what? They are actually useless. If all you're doing is consuming content for a big company, your life is useless. We've got to stop this. We've got to stop letting this be our children's childhood. So, so I hope I've scared you sufficiently, because there's never been anything like this. This is a civilizational crisis point. We sure didn't need this right now. We've got enough other civilizational crisis points, but this one is here, and at least we as parents and teachers can do something about it. So let's talk about what to do, because the amazing thing is that we can actually solve this. We can actually address this for very little money. And here's how it works. I think what I brought to the table as a social psychologist, coming into an area where media studies scholars had been working for decades and giving advice like, well, there are pluses and minuses. Well, talk to your child. Every kid is different. Some kids may be ready for a phone at 7, some not till, that's the way it was for 10, 20 years. And I come into this field as a social psychologist saying like, what the hell are we doing? I mean, look what's happening. The kids have to be on because everyone else is on. It's a social dilemma. It's a collective action trap. And so the solution to a collective action trap is collective action. If we do these 4 things together, we roll back the phone-based childhood. Now, most of the way. There's still more to do, but these are the 4 relatively easy steps that will profoundly change childhood if they can be done in large numbers. So no smartphones before age 14, and that includes iPads. So no smartphone or iPad before 14. No social media before 16. These 2 I intended as norms because in the US we don't have a functioning legislature. So I was just hoping that people would just do this. But in the UK you have a parliament which sometimes does things. Now you might laugh at that, but compared to us, you didn't have all the tech bros sitting there when Keir Starmer took over. This one we need law for, phone-free schools, which I'll talk about again, and then more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. If we do these 4 things, we roll it back. So just a little commentary on that, especially for those of you who have any influence in the education world. So just a little bit more about phone-free schools. So the thing about a school is if anyone can text, then everyone has to check, because nobody wants to be the one kid who doesn't know at lunch what happened in 3rd period, which everyone else is talking about. That is so painful for any child. So this is an all or nothing thing. And most schools in the UK say they ban phones during class, which is useless because then everyone's on the phone in between classes, and my kids tell me in New York City public schools we have the same policy. They're on their phones in class too. They just hide it in a book, hide it in their desk. So it has to be what we call bell to bell. It has to be the kids turn in the phone in the morning, they get it back in the afternoon. That's the only thing that works, and it works magnificently. Every school that does it gets the most incredible results. Let's see. Where's the, okay. And one way to think about this is the people who made this technology, they don't let their kids use it. They make their nannies sign contracts that they will not let their children see the nanny's phone. They send their kids to the Waldorf school, which has 0 technology in the classroom. It's the world Sophie was describing. They know that that's the best way to educate kids. Now, of course, there's a computer room, and as Sophie said, you learn programming, learn video editing. That's all great. Technology has a role, but not on the desktop. If technology is on a child's desk, that's what they're going to do, and it's the cat and mouse game that Sophie was describing. And so just a little demonstration that it has to be bell to bell is this. There was a survey by the National Education Association in the US. The teachers hate the phones, and they were asked, how disruptive are cell phones during class time for you? These are teachers in the United States. How disruptive are phones during class? And you sort them by what policy the school has. What you find is that there are 2 really bad policies, which is, oh yeah, you can't use it in class, but you can use it between classes and at lunch. And the worst policy of all is, oh, well, we don't tell teachers how to teach. We let them each make up their own mind. And they all have to end up basically at the point of just not doing anything. That's what my kids say. Most teachers just give up. And so in these 2, if you have a school with those 2 policies, the teachers overwhelmingly say, yeah, phones are really disruptive. The only policy that works is where you store it away for the day, because it's only there that you get very little disruption. It really, really works. And I finally was able to watch Swiped. I'm not smart enough to use a VPN to watch it in the US, so I just waited till I came here. And again, raise your hand if you saw that, Swiped. It's a great documentary about a school where they got a bunch of kids to go without their phone. Interestingly, and then I just found this in the news the other day, even at the school where Breonna Gay went after she was killed, even at that school, they have put in a phone ban, and the students like it. It's much better for the students. Some of them object in the first week or 2, but by 3 weeks in, they realize It's really fun to play soccer or cards at lunch and not have everyone be on their phone. And then the final norm, which is very important for schools and also for individuals, is find ways to give your kids far more free play and independence. Because this is not about screens primarily, this is about childhood. And we can't just take away the screens. And a lot of kids don't know how to play. They need repeated practice. They go, you push them outside, they say, what do we do? So we have to make this a regular part. It's crazy to say this. We have to make play a regular part of childhood again. I co-founded an organization called Let Grow. Go to letgrow.org. Our most powerful project is the Let Grow experience. You just have the kid has to pick something that they think they can do by themselves with their parents' permission, but without their parents. And I'll just show you, when we did this with my daughter when she was 5, it was deliver lunch to daddy. So my wife put my lunch in a box and then put it in a bag and sent Francesca. She had to cross a big street, not so busy, but a big street. And here she is coming up the stairs to my office, and just the excitement. I mean, they're just jumping up and down. The joy when they get to do something independently is just so affirming and so wonderful to see. And so you can do this regularly. Every school should do this. Say in second year. Suppose when kids are 7 or 8, if all the second year students are doing this, then everybody sees kids doing errands and going to the store and riding their bicycles. So this is the way you change a whole community, is with the Let Grow experience. I urge you to do that. And finally, just a little bit on EdTech. Sophie already gave you an excellent overview. I'll just add a few things. So let's see. Okay, so as I showed you, test scores began going down after 2012. I don't know if it's because of the phones or because that's when we put iPads and Chromebooks on kids' desks. We just don't know. But for whatever it is, as soon as we brought in the EdTech, scores plunged. What also happened is kids got lonelier. This is PISA data, 6 items of questions sort of like, I feel lonely at school. And these were the numbers before, and then we go through this transition. Kids all over the world are lonelier than they were in 2010 because everyone's on their phone or everyone's on their device during school. UNESCO has been great on this. UNESCO, doing world surveys, finds that student use of devices has a negative impact on academic performance, mostly because of the increased distraction. Sweden was one of the first countries to get rid of paper and pencil, and they're also very sharp and savvy about what they do, and they quickly realized this was a terrible mistake, and they are undoing it. As the education minister said, there's clear scientific evidence that digital tools impair rather than enhance student learning, again, as Sophie was saying. So I can put this into a kind of a haiku, because you will see evidence, they do provide evidence that, if you use math, whatever it is, the students are more engaged. They're more engaged. And that may be true, but that doesn't help, and here's why. If you gamify a quarter of a child's school day with these quick rewards, the flashing balloons, all the gamification stuff, what happens? You will get more engagement during that part of the day. But, drawing on Anna Lemke's work, or anybody who studies addiction, the child's dopamine neurons will habituate to that constant stimulation and will become less responsive, needing more stimulation in order to make the child feel normal. And what that means is that the child will now find everything that's not gamified painfully boring. And that's, I think, what we've done to our kids by giving them devices in school. And this, I think, is especially true for boys. Boys are really dropping out at much higher rates. Now, I just want to give one note of encouragement. I think this is a very important idea. Many of you with young kids, you're thinking, my God, is this guy saying don't ever let my kids watch TV? What am I going to do? This is going to be really hard to raise kids without TV and screens. And what I realized once I began to understand the devastation that iPads are wreaking on young children, I realized, you know what? Stories are good things, because we're human beings, and human beings have always told stories. We've always raised our kids in stories. Stories are part of what it is to be human, and a television set is actually a pretty good way to convey stories. And so if your child, I think this is fine. If you have, let's say, if you have 2 kids watching a long story, it's not a 5-second video, it's like 90 minutes, they have to pay attention, they follow a story, they get immersed in it. A long story is not dopamine, it's immersion, which is not addictive, which is good. If they're watching a long story about people in a world with moral values and moral challenges, rather than a 15-second video of somebody getting hit in the balls with something, and they're watching it on a big screen with another person, this is good. This is a good thing. Stories are good. Don't be afraid of your kids watching a movie. Teach them to watch movies. Their elder sisters and brothers can't. But what's bad is fragmenting time. This is what you should give your kids none of. And that's iPad time, iPhone. Just hand them a touchscreen device, let them go wild, and it's mostly going to end with short videos on YouTube or TikTok. So using a touchscreen alone, watching short amoral videos, jumping around as soon as anything gets slightly boring. I've been on this video for 10 seconds. Is it the most interesting thing I could be doing? Let's see what else there is. That's what kids learn to do when you just hand them an iPad. So that's my talk to you. I think the damage is almost beyond comprehension. Again, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what is happening to humanity since 2010. But the solutions are actually doable if we act together. And so I hope you'll go to anxiousgeneration.com. We have a lot of resources there for parents, for teachers. We're running a movement to roll back the phone-based childhood around the world in 3 years. Not that no kids will be on iPads, but that the trajectory of humanity will be different in 3 years, and we're going to be moving towards getting it out of early childhood and out of schools. And our mission is to reverse the two major changes, the loss of the play-based childhood and the rise of the phone-based childhood. There's been a global movement, mostly of mothers standing up, forming groups, working together. Some of this started just before my book came out. In the UK, you had Daisy Greenwell and Claire Fernie, I think it is. Question, yes? Are you them? What? Is that Claire or Daisy? Oh, great to see you. Wait, which one are you, Claire? Okay, great to see you. Welcome to the talk. In Britain, I mean, in a sense, the revolution, the parents' revolution, kind of started in Britain a couple weeks before my book came out, and then it's around the world. So you have several great organizations in the UK. In the US, we don't have a functioning legislature in Washington, but we have 50 functioning legislatures in the states, and they're doing all kinds of things on all kinds of policies. So in conclusion, I've argued to you that if you're born after 1995, our kids, and it's not just Gen Z, it's now Gen Alpha as well, their brains are growing around their phones, metaphorically and almost physically, in the same way that this tree was growing around this tombstone. We've got to stop, and we can stop if we do it together. Thank you.